It is draft week for the 49ers, and Rod and I are back to talk about what we think or maybe what we hope will happen with this draft and what positions the 49ers need to fill. One thing I'm pretty sure about is they're not going to draft an offensive lineman in the first round. That's just not what they do. But they have a type when it comes to some of these picks. So we'll dig through it. But first off, Rod, what's been going on? We haven't chatted in a little bit.
Yeah, just my life is pretty much the same every day. I go to dialysis, I do my thing, and then I work. So yeah, it's been, and then I get on the internet and argue with 49er fans. So yeah, that's just nothing other than that. How you been? You've been busy. I know I know at least on the even on the BSPN side you've been busy, but how's everything else going?
Everything is good. Busy is definitely happening. I have a business trip this week, so I'll be gone in Dallas, Texas, of all places. Um, so I'm glad that we can actually get this done. I leave on Tuesday, and I'll be back on Friday. But
Nice.
this is something I'm glad the schedule fell as it did, so we could talk about this because I wanted to make sure that we could do that. But okay, so 49ers, as it stands, this is without any trades that may happen between now and the draft. They have pick 27, pick 58, pick 127, 133, 138, 139. So they don't have any picks in rounds 5 through 7 as it stands today. So I can't imagine they don't trade back with some of those fourth rounders to actually pick on the last day, but that's what it looks like as it is now. So if I were to ask you, for a first round and a second round pick, 27 and 58. So you're getting two players in the top 60 unless you trade back. What positions would you like to see them fill with those two picks? Or is there one or two positions that you believe are super duper important this year and more important than other positions where they need to really lock these picks in on those positions?
It is as clear as the nose on my face. The two structural positions, structurally broken positions that they could address, they could and I believe should address, are left guard and free safety. And the board stacks up in such a way that there are two players. Well, there's three players. Um, I was real high on the guard from from Oregon, Pregnon, not the hurt one, Isaiah Worrell. He's a good one too, but he tore his ACL, and I wouldn't mind taking him later. But Pregnon is the player. I mean, he's all American. He is a um super scheme fit for what the 49ers do. The only problem with him is that he's 25.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's just it's really when you think about it, when he comes due for his second contract, he'll be 30. That's crazy. So where I settle, and again, this is all with the knowledge of what you said. They've drafted one offensive lineman in the first round in the Lynch Shanahan regime, and that was McGlinchey. So it's just something. It's not something they do, and I doubt they would take a tackle. We'll talk about who I think they'll take. But my pick would be the guard out of Texas A&M, Chase be on be I it's Bisononis, I think. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce these names. But
Basantis? Is it
yes,
Basantis?
that sounds right. It's
Okay.
like bison, but then
And then Tis on the
yeah.
end.
Yeah. So he's in watching him play, he is aggressive and he's got good hands and he's 21 years old and he's got a lot of upside. I just think he's going to be a good player for 10 years. I don't think the Niners will take him, but that's who I would draft. And then my 58 would be free safety. That is the glaring weakness in that safety room is they've got two. Well, I think Mustafa can be a really good box safety. He could be one of the best in the league. If he could figure out how to tackle, he could be one of the best. And then Brown is a nice backup, but nobody in that room can cover. So they need a true free safety, and I would take Kamari Ramsey out of USC, who is not as strong a box safety, and people talk a lot about in the scouting community about him and his performance in the run game, but that's just lazy because I know the tape that everybody talks about when they talk about him and his weakness in the run game is he got ran all over by Love and Price versus Notre Dame. And yeah, he looked bad in that game, but it was Love and Price. I mean, they those two backs could legitimately both be first round picks. So yeah, that was a bad game for him. But other than that, number one, he's great in coverage, which is what the 49ers need. And I don't think he's as bad against the run as the Notre Dame tape might have made him look. So those would be my two picks. It's highly unlikely that they're gonna take a guard. If they take a lineman at all, that they would take a guard in the first round, and there's a chance they have taken safeties in the second round before,
Mhm.
but I'm not expecting to hit, I'm not maybe in the late rounds, we might be in alignment on one, but those are my first 2 picks.
So Chase Bisontis or Bisontis, however you pronounce that.
Mhm,
I pulled up the Beast, Brugler's his draft book essentially, and he has him going. His grade is first, second round. So this guy is this is Dane's takeaway. Bisontis is a burly, sawed-off blocker with the body quickness and core strength to get the upper hand in all phases. He projects as an eventual NFL starter and has traits that will speak to both zone and power schemes. Now, the Ringer has their own draft board, and they have him a little bit lower. In their big board, they have him as the 67th pick. Now, the big board doesn't take into account need. It just takes into account
mhm.
how they rank all of the players. But as we're kind of talking about here, the 49ers have a type, and Kyle Shanahan specifically has a type, and it seems like they are just going to continually take shot after shot after shot on edge rushers if they can, on defensive linemen, and on wide receivers. It's almost like they feel that those specific positions are really the valuable positions to take shots at some of these first round players. Um, I understand it. Like I've been listening to the Ringer draft podcast, and I've listened to kind of them explain how some of these positions get tiered. And so for the 49ers, it does seem like, they're going if possible, if there's a wide receiver that they appreciate and that they really value in that spot, that seems to be where a lot of the draft folks are having them take. So you hear someone like a Denzel Boston, and it looks like Casey Concepcion, who was mocked to them very early, his stock is going up, and he's probably not going to be available by the time they pick. But what do you think about kind of the Niners really judging some of these positions as higher value positions to take flyers in the first round over others?
I get it if you think that the players have a higher upside. Now, there's a player that we're not going to be able to even sniff, like Jordan Tyson. He's had injury concerns, but the talent says that he could be one of the best players in this draft. If we were talking about that type of player, it makes sense, that he's got injury concerns, but the upside is more and when you talk about those positions like tackle or receiver or edge or corner, the benefit from if you hit on that pick, it outsizes, the risk that you're taking. So it's a it's a risk, but the reward is commensurate with the risk. And you just don't, and I agree, if you want to look at it through that lens, a guard is just not, you're not going to get the bang for your buck in terms of an outsized return. But my thought is, I think from what I've seen from this dude, he's young, he's aggressive, he's strong, and he's young. I mean, again, he's young. He's 21 years old. This guy, if you hit that pick, you could be settling, you could be filling that position for 10 years. That's how I look at it. I'm not saying I don't ever think he'll be an all pro, but when you're picking at 27, that changes the count. You're not really going to find all pro level players at that point in the draft. You're really lucky if you do that. So I'm about number one about scheme fit, and then two, is this guy going to sign a second contract with us? And I think that guy clicks both those boxes. And I mean, the biggest weakness in the offense, I think, last year was Spencer Burford and left guard. If you could settle that position and just get to a point where you don't even have to worry about that anymore for the next 5 years, I think you do that. Um, I just I'm not high on any of these receivers. I just think, I mean, they're fine, but again, I think when I saw this offseason, when I saw what they were doing, I just assumed that they, like me, saw this draft class and were like, look, we can just kick this down we can kick this can down the road another year, fill in with Evans and Kirk, and then we come back to it next year where, it's, we never know a year from now what it's going to look like, but it's shaping up to be one of the best wide receiver drafts in recent memory. Not only at the top, but depth wise. And there are a lot of players that project and look like 49er type players. Um, so that is what I thought they were going to do. But like you say, you see Cooper being drafted here. Everybody was talking, but those national guys though, a lot of them, I don't know if you've been listening. There's been a whole lot of talk about like Caden Proctor, and that's just lazy thinking. Trent Williams, is going for what he's going through. They do need a young tackle, but that dude is like completely wrong for this system. He's like 360 pounds, and he's closer to 380 than he is 360. And you're telling me he's going to be your zone scheme tackle for the next 5 to 7 years? I just don't see it. It doesn't make sense, and you see that a lot where you talk about the types of players that they project here without any notion or thought to how they fit into what it is they do here. And like that was what I didn't understand about Concepcion. He's not a blocker. He's like a he's like a rich man's Ray McLeod,
Mm.
which is fine, but at 27, really? Is that what we're doing? But and again, I see in certain systems where he could, you know, pop off. And again, I don't see the ceiling with him. He could be a good player. I don't doubt that he'll be a fine player. I don't think he's ever going to make a Pro Bowl. I just think I see him more of a slot gadget type guy than I see him being, you know, than him be like even Wes Welker or somebody like that. I don't see it. And all of this is projection, but I just
Mhm.
don't see him being like a real difference maker.
Who is your favorite wide receiver in this draft?
I mean, from the 49er lens, I don't really like any of these guys. If you were to put a gun to my head and said if I had to take one of them, it would probably be Cooper. Um, he's a sturdy guy. He clearly he's a playmaker, and in the biggest moments in his college career, at least, he was the guy that Mendoza went to make big plays. And I like that trait, but none of them really fit when you this system has a very, very specific set of skills for the receivers that they need, and none of them really fit what it is that we need. And that's when you see what we did in the offseason. None of those guys are really Shanahan system type guys, but they have traits and you can kind of moneyball the traits together to like put a room together. But if you're talking about when I think of drafting a guy, I'm thinking about we're going to bring this guy in and he's going to be able to do a job and we're going to be able to have him. I'm thinking long term, the next 5 to 7 years is what I would be thinking. And I just don't see any of these guys that can do that. I see guys that have certain traits like Boston. He's a big guy, but I'm fundamentally like kind of like Evans. He's not Mike Evans. Mike Evans at his peak was another level, but basically he is like a big contested catch guy. He's not going to get much separation. He's going to try to play receiver like a power forward. He's going to try to box guys out and he's going to just try to be a contested catch guy, which I guess is fine, but you would like a guy who we've been talking about this, it seems like for the past 5 years. I would like a guy who is going to extend the field and who's
Yeah.
going to be a vertical threat. That guy really doesn't exist in the form that we need. We don't have any use for a 5'9", 170-pound guy that runs. We don't have a use. Xavier Worthy really doesn't have any role with the 49ers. He's not going to block. So when is he going to be on the field to stretch the field? It's just so those type of burners. We've nowhere in Shanahan's history can you point to that guy, the guy that who is just the small jitterbug type fast receiver who just runs go routes. Because hell, Calvin could do that job. I mean, if that's all we're looking for, so it's a mess at receiver. But in projecting and looking forward, there are a lot of like true X receivers in next year's draft at all levels. I don't know. Hopefully, willfully, we're not bad enough that we're talking about um, Ryan Williams and or Smith from Ohio State at that high of the draft, but at all levels, first round, day two, day three, all through there. Next year is going to be a really, really deep wide receiver draft. It looks like, but everybody thought that this year was going to be a great quarterback draft, and you just never know until we get there. But I just don't. I wouldn't see a guy. I know people have been projected to taking a wide receiver in the first or second round, and I hope they don't. But there are some guys that if they want to wait to day three, um, to take some shots at them, because I mean, you get to the fourth round, if you want to take some dart throws, then that's the time to do it. But I don't think you need. I believe that those first, like you say, in those first 60 picks, you need to come away with two guys who are going to play 500-600 snaps for you. You really can't afford to. I don't believe you can really afford to be taking um, developmental picks and redshirt guys that high in the draft.
I mean, Shanahan wouldn't play him anyways. Like, he's just gonna
Right.
they're just gonna be in the doghouse immediately. You know what's hilarious is, you were talking about the Indiana wide receiver being your favorite one, and then their offensive coordinator's name is Mike Shanahan, not the Mike
Yes.
Shanahan that we know and love, the other Mike Shanahan.
Mhm.
Though that Mike Shanahan also he played in the league, so I just
Mhm.
found that hilarious. Um, so but Cooper is, Matt Barrows's draft crush. Like, he does a draft crush every year, and
Mhm.
usually it's like a guy that, maybe you'd never heard of, but, he's really high on Cooper. Do you think the other position that the Niners are seemingly always interested in bringing in, the edge, is there anybody on in that position that you think would be available to be available somewhere that they could either pick or that they could kind of trade up or down to get in this year's draft?
I think they are well positioned for that to get an edge with a caveat. I don't think that all of the top guys that we would have a chance at. Like, we're not talking about Ruben Bain, we're not talking about David Bailey, we're not talking about RBL Reese. Those guys, as I've been jokingly saying, those guys will be at their draft party dinner before the 49ers get on the clock. So
Do you think Baines stock drops after that report came out about him being in the
probably
car
the
accident a
he
couple years
I
ago?
don't I don't think that it's gonna drop. I think the talent is just too much for him to drop. He might drop like in a way that Jalen Carter dropped, where
Mhm.
he went from being top 3 to 11 or something like that. I don't think that he drops enough to where he's even a real serious consideration for us. It's just that position and his skill about his ability was just too in demand. And like you said, we've got a analog to Jalen Carter is the exact same thing, vehicular manslaughter and all that went into that. So I just don't think he drops that far. But there are several guys who are situational pass rushers who I think that would be, that's what we need because Michael Williams is going to be a good first and second down, runs edge setting, run stopping edge. So we don't need that. Most of the other guys that you talk about post top 15, they're all that same kind of guy. We don't need that. We need a edge rush, a corner bender, a guy who is going to threaten the edge and, that tackles have to worry about. And there are several of those guys, the highest being Cassius Howell from Ohio State. I've heard him projected at 27, which I just think is kind of high for him. That it's hard to try to do that. If he is your number one guy, ideally what you'd be able to do is trade out of the first round. If you decided this is the guy we want, ideally you'd be able to trade it back into the second round and get him and pick up another pick because of not only is he not really valued that high, but the position dictates your fifth year extension is going to be based on his first round at a premium position. When you get to renegotiating for that second contract, if it goes sideways, you're going to be talking about a franchise tag or a transition tag at a premium position at edge. Like last year, I think I don't know if it's last year or this year coming up, the franchise tag number for Edge is like $26 million. So it's one of those positions that if you're taking a guy who is not going to be a 3 down edge, that's not how the franchise tag works. He is an edge. So if he is a Bryce Huff I think he'd be a better player than Bryce Huff, but I see him as like an Elvis Dumervil, um, situational pass rusher, which Elvis Dumervil made a Pro Bowl
Mhm.
as a situational pass. So if you've got a good guy, a guy who is good at that position, it can be extremely valuable. But I think you have to, I talk about often right player, right pick, because there are a lot of times you can get the right player, but it skews the value if you take them in the wrong place. And I just think 27 would be the wrong place for that particular player, but he's probably not going to be there at 58. So if you were going to take him, you either have to bite the bullet, take him at 27, and just know that you kind of overpaid, or hope that you can, and that's the other thing we talk about online all the time about, oh, just trade back. Well, you know, you have to find somebody who's willing to trade back with you. And then there's always, if you got a specific player in mind, then you're sitting there with, on pins and needles, hoping that somebody doesn't take them ahead of you or somebody doesn't jump up over you. And because that, another tangent I have is, you talk about these interviews and um who is interested in who. I don't believe any of that because these guys aren't telling each other who it is that they're interested in, the guys that they like, and I don't believe any of that stuff that gets out in the media for just that reason is that if your draft board is common knowledge, then people can maneuver likewise. Well, I need to get to this spot because I know they want him. So this is where I need to be. Or if I'm here, I know I'm good. So all those games are being played. So yeah, I like him. I like um I think it's Malachi. I just know last name. Lawrence
Mhm.
is another one who is a situational pass rusher who would be good for them. Romello Height, they brought him in. He would be a guy that I would think you would throw a dart for at in the fourth round, um, if you don't get one earlier. So yeah, I think there are some places that they can fill that position. I just don't think you should do it at with the first pick. But I studied it like you do. That is a place where they like to take edges at in their first round pick, or first pick. Drake Drake Jackson wasn't a first rounder, but he was their first pick in that draft, and so that it wouldn't shock me, and I wouldn't hate that pick. I like the player. I like Cassius Howe. I just, if you could, you would try to like to get get him at the right price, and you might have to overpay, and that's fine too if you really think he's the best player at that position.
If you were to guess, based on your knowledge of Shanahan and Lynch, is there somebody in that first round that has been projected to the Niners or close to being projected to the Niners that you think that they would reach for? Because, you mentioned you like the guard best. What you'd probably not bet very much money on them taking that person. Maybe
Mm,
actually in the second round, it could happen. But is
yeah.
is there a player that
Mhm.
that you think that they would actually take that is being mocked to them?
I think the more I hear it and I hear the logic, which I don't argue the logic, I think they could take Caleb Lomu. I think that could happen. They've only taken McClinchy there,
Mhm.
but his skill set really does fit this system, and the need to, you know, figure out Trent's successor, it's real. The only problem is this is supposed to be a contending team, and what you're telling me is so the pick makes sense. The player makes sense.
Mhm.
Except he didn't have any value at guard. So what you're telling me is that your first round pick is not going to provide you anything but insurance
Mhm.
and future value for this year. And I just think that the way that this team is constructed, they really don't have the ability to take redshirt to make redshirt picks. And I understand when you tell me that they need to do something about the Trent situation. I get that. I, I just don't think I don't think that solving that situation this year involves him not being on the team. So if he's gonna be on the team, whoever you pick there is not gonna beat him out. So he's not it's a zero. And I just don't think this team as currently constructed that it makes sense to take a zero at your first round pick. But I could the talent is enticing. I see it. I could see how Lynch could get there. I could see how Shanahan could get there. He's got everything you would want. And unlike the kid from Ohio, Arizona State, who is a physical freak, but he's only been playing football for 4 years, which he's a lot more risky than the Caleb kid is. I have no doubt that Lomu is going to be a good player. I just I just think it's the right player at the wrong time.
Mhm.
But when is there ever a right time to try to find a successor to Trent Williams? If you argue that with me, I can't. I don't have a I can't really argue with the logic. I just think when you like you said, when you look at what Lynch would do, I just don't know if he would do that. But I could see if he came to that conclusion, that's not a pick I would make, but it's I wouldn't call it a mistake. I just think it would be disappointing, but not a mistake. Yeah, that's a tricky one. I spent a lot of time when you sent the outline thinking about who, I got my list of who I would take, but
Mhm.
who did I think he would take? And that was the only one I could come up with. I was trying to find uh or again, I think Howell is a spot that he could do. They could take Cassius Howell was the other one. It's just again, it's one of those things where do you take a pass rush specialist at 27? I I wouldn't, but if you really believe that he can be that dude, that is one of those positions where as you said in the outline that what you were talking about in the shows you were listening to, that's one of those positions that if you're going to reach it could be, that reach, that pick could pay off. And between the two, I would take the edge before I would take the tackle.
So Brugler, his takeaway with Howell. So Howell is he's from Texas A&M, and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and he said that Howell needs to expand the consistency of his impact beyond winning as a high side rusher, but his athletic twitch, play speed, and violent demeanor make for the type of package you bet on at the position. At worst, he should be a designated pass rusher with the ceiling of a versatile NFL starter like Hassan Reddick, who can be moved around the front. But that sounds a little bit more like what you would want versus having another Mykel Williams, and there are guys in front of Howell who look like they're more of the Mykel Williams type
Right.
than Howell. So it's
He's
interesting to look at
exactly
it
what
that way.
he's exactly what the 49ers need. It's those things that would be considered weaknesses for other teams. They've got plenty of guys who can set the edge and play the run. We don't need him to do that. What we don't have is anybody who can win on high side rushes. If that's all he ever is, the way this room is currently constructed, I won't say forever, but for the next 2 or 3 years, if that was what his role was with this team, that would be perfect. That is just what the doctor would order. He would be perfect.
Outside of the 49ers, who are your favorite players in this draft? It's being the way that the draft is being presented is that it's not a great draft. It's not you don't have the star quality of drafts prior, and like you said, next year everyone thinks is going to be like one of the all timers. But who out there in this draft are you kind of excited to track?
Two players really. I love Jeremiah Love. I think he has what it takes to be one of those transcended backs, kind of like, I'm not going to compare anybody to McCaffrey. Um, but I guess it might be a sacrilegious to compare anybody to Bijan at this point. But I think that, he could be that kind of back because he gives you value in the pass game as well. So he could easily be a Gibbs or a Robinson type player. And then the other guy is Sonny Styles. He's got Fred Warner written all over him. He is just a playmaker. And the thing that you hear about Sonny Styles that everybody talks about is like what a good guy he is. And that's the thing as a fan um doing these evaluations, that's the big part that we don't get to meet these guys, we don't get to you know go to dinner or go to Top Golf and just kind of hang with them to see what kind of people they are, because that's important. It's important. um I can see it. I can see when you if you turn on the tape and you see this guy has all the talent, but then you meet him and he is a solid dude and smart guy and has his head on straight for a young man. I could see where you could that could how that colors a draft board, because it's important. It is, and it's something that I'm very aware of at all times. Like we signed that guard from Miami, Robert Jones. And when you look at the tape, they ran the same offense that we run. And
Mhm.
he was horrible. He was terrible. But what I don't know is what kind of relationship he had with McDaniel, and maybe he's a great guy and he knows the system and was hurt. I know he was coming off a broken neck last year. So I guess you take a flyer at that guy, but I was thinking when I was watching the tape, I'm like, this guy is terrible. Why would you sign him? But again, I often say this is a relationship business, and you just don't know what kind of person he is. And if he's a good person and somebody that McDaniel, kind of went to bat for, that those type of things, I could see where those type of things go a long way, and I could see where these draft meetings and these impromptu meetings could be the difference between you taking a guy and not taking a guy, because that again, the interpersonal part of it, it's important. You obviously what they are as players should be the most important thing, but it's a workplace ultimately, and you don't want to have you don't want to have a locker room full of assholes, even if they're talented assholes. You have to you have to bear that in mind. I think good teams do in how the composition and how this guy fits in to, is he what I would hope to think that they think a 49er is.
Mhm. It's crazy because Styles is 6'5" and was playing safety and then he just kind of grew outgrew, and they see him as a
Mhm.
linebacker who's gonna be able to do a lot of stuff, but, yeah, the freaky athlete, you don't hear the freaky athlete, that often in that
They
position, so
say
that
the beat writers in Tennessee say that Saleh loves him. That he really loves Sonny Styles, but the consensus on them is that around their team, the writers say they think they're gonna take Love, but they
mm,
wouldn't be shocked if they took Styles.
so what do they have? They have the 4th pick.
Mhm.
So Raiders and are locked in at Mendoza. Who are the
Mhm.
Jets gonna get at 2?
They're saying it's gonna be either Reese or Bailey.
Mm, yeah, this is, I remember when I was a kid, back when we were younger, the draft experts and such, it was like, you had some weekly magazines like Sports Illustrated would have like a draft thing, um, but there were some monthly magazines too. So you had like Sport Magazine or Inside Sport, and so
Mhm.
they would do their draft predictions. But as you know, just based on what we know about the draft today, like 2 months ago's mock draft is so outdated by the time the draft
Right.
so I remember I'll be reading, like, the Sport magazine, mock draft, and then the draft comes, and I'm like, "No, David Klingler didn't get drafted in with the first pick." But we have
Yeah,
so
and
many
then, like you
great
say, it's
resources to keep us up to speed on this stuff now.
and then as it like you say, as it progressed, those publications, Athlon and all of them, they would do a draft magazine. And
Mhm.
like you say, it would be one of those deals where by the time, you know, those would go to print 2 or 3 months before the draft.
Yeah.
So that data was always kinda skewed. It's a completely different world where we live in now, where we've got all the information and the data that these draft guys are giving us is like to the minute. And it changes. Like if you look at Kuipers or Buglers or who's the other guy, McShay's
Mhm.
first mock to the last mock, it's they're vastly different. Because you're talking about those first um drafts, those first mock drafts are some of them happen, while the season is still going, and then
Yeah.
you've got the Senior Bowl, and you've got the combine, and you've got the pro days, and so by the time we get to their last mocks, we've got so much more information about these guys, and they're getting information from the teams, which I don't know. I know if I was a media guy and, like, anybody associated with the 49ers were giving me information, I know I wouldn't believe anything they told me, because they have shown me as a fan of the team that they are so anti any kind of information leaking, that if they're leaking any kind of information to you, there's a reason that they're leaking, and it is probably not transparency. It is probably, a tactic or a diversion. And so yeah, it's a wild process. We're both old enough to remember, Mel Kiper was like that was this is like an industry that he basically created. The draft expert. I remember listening back in the ESPN radio days. I used to love when Mel would come on with Chuck Wilson and Tony Bruno. That was like it was always it was just cool to hear somebody who was so knowledgeable about something that was so neat at the time, so niche and obscure as the NFL draft, and the thought that somebody could make their living. Because back in the day, that's what he was doing. He was making a living on his newsletters, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
Him and his wife Kim in the basement in Baltimore, cranking out newsletters, and selling them, and that. he built that into where, he is when you know, there are a lot more people in that space and a lot of good people in that space. He's still the godfather of it. When you think of the mock draft or the big board, Kuiper's big board is still the gold standard.
Yeah, absolutely. And this stuff, it's interesting because when you are doing the projections, like Mel Kiper is getting information from a bunch of different relationships that he's cultivated to see who's going to be high. There's lots of things, and he himself, when he puts together his board, like he may think that this player is going to get drafted in front of this player, but I think this player who's going to be drafted after is actually going to have a better career. He may think that, but he's not
Mhm.
going to go, well, Mendoza, he's the leader of the QBs in a maybe a not so great quarterback draft, but
Mhm.
he's not gonna go, well, on my big board, Mendoza is like 20th, so thus I'm going to predict
Mm-mm.
that he's gonna be the 20th pick. He doesn't look at it that way. He's projecting what he
Mm-mm.
think the teams are gonna do. So that it's interesting to look at it that way because it's not what it's what he thinks that where he thinks the teams are going. And this just happened because the WNBA just had their draft. And we had a couple of guys on to talk, some WNBA draft experts on Pod Holla. And before the draft started, we did a little bit of a preview. And for the longest time, the mocks were saying two players were kind of at the top. One of them was an international player named Awa Pham Thiam, and the second player was AZ Fudd out of UConn. And so they were
Mhm.
like kind of 1-2, 1-2 throughout from the beginning until now. And then we got like 3 days before the draft, and the latest mock had actually neither of them as the number one pick. And it was like Olivia Miles was all of a sudden the number one pick. So I was like, okay, none of these players changed. They didn't really work out for any of these teams. The WNBA doesn't have the same draft stuff that the NFL or the NBA does. But what changed is the information that goes out to these reporters from their sources. Now, as it turns out, AZ Fudd became the number one pick, and Awa Pham was two, and Olivia Miles was three. But I'm not. I don't really care who picks who. What I'm fascinated by is the process in which the reporters are getting this information, and then saying, "I think the team is going to choose X." Like that's an interesting thing because as a reporter, you uh if you were to compare your knowledge of X's and O's with Matt Barrows, it's probably pretty comparable. Like you do your homework,
Mhm.
Matt Barrows does his homework. The difference is that Matt Barrows has a bunch of sources being a reporter, and you're getting your information in different ways. But it's just the idea of what a mock draft actually is that is the interesting thing to me. So the draft will happen this weekend, and maybe I don't know what your schedule is like, but maybe next Sunday or something we could kind of do a quick
Mhm.
recap for another episode of this show. And before we get out of here, I'm actually interested in your thoughts on any of the players that the Niners had picked up since the last time we talked. I want to say we talked about everyone except for maybe Christian Kirk.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like
And I thought.
that there were some smaller things that they did. You talked about Robert Jones.
Mhm.
What's really interesting is JJ is not, as far as I know, he's not been signed. Juwan Jennings is still out
Mm-mm.
there as a player,
Mm-mm.
but the Niners have essentially already said their goodbyes to him. So
Mhm.
Christian Kirk comes in on a 1 year, $6 million deal, which is more like a 2.78 guaranteed deal. But I mean, I guess he's just gonna do some slot stuff. Could he do some stuff in the special teams? I don't. I feel like I've had him on my fantasy team many times, and not not really been super successful there. What is your take on Christian Kirk?
Well, if you get the Christian Kirk that played at the end of the season with um, Houston, um, he can be productive. The problem is I just again it's with him the same thing with both him and Evans. I don't think there's no way that you could think that both of those guys play 12 games. Each. They might play 12 games total, probably more than that. But it's just with him, just as with Evans, it's the last 3 years, 2 or 3 years, we're talking about injuries. It's not
Hmm.
like we're like you can say that last year was some sort of anomaly. He's played like I forget what the exact numbers. He's played like 33 games, 32 or 33 games over the past 3 seasons. So it's just how do you which, I'm no mathlete, but that's like 11 games a season.
Hmm.
If you're cool with that, but I guess if you say that, they're only paying him $2 million, I guess that would be fine. I mean, if all you were to get was the 12 games, you would kind of hope that some of those games are in like January. Um, so I think he's a good player. Um, but I'm just not very hopeful when you get these guys who are over 30 and they have this injury history, especially when it's like soft tissue stuff. Like Mike Evans, he's missed games the past 3 years. And he's had hamstring problems for the past 7 years. That's not the kind of thing that gets better as you get older. It's kind of like the kind of thing that like in the NBA, you have to load manage that player and load manage around the hamstring injuries. It's just it's those type of especially when it's like Evans, when it's both of them. It's not like you can say it's just one. It's one of those things. I mean,
Hmm.
there's still the debate on whether how much of that is overwork, how much of that is hereditary, how much of it is his gait. Their NBA um um trainers who do like these gait studies that they think they can predict based on how you run, which is not that's not the most ridiculous thing in the world, that they can predict those type of calf and hamstring type injuries kind of based on how you run, and apparently Wimby, his team has been on the cutting edge of that, and they have kind of tried to train him. As he was coming up, he was trained on kind of how to run, and they were to change his gait to try to eliminate those type of injuries. So I think, to answer your question, I think Christian Kirk, when he plays, will be productive. He can get open. He is the type of receiver that will do well with Brock. I think that would, if I give them any credit, I don't like the fact that they chose these dudes with this checkered injury history. But what I will say is both of those guys, those receivers, profile as guys that will play well with Brock.
Hmm.
Um, I think they both can, in different ways, um, get themselves open and make themselves available to him. And he is the kind of guy who is accurate enough to find him. And so I think from a talent standpoint, I don't know how much Mike Evans still has in the tank, but in the same with, I just don't know how much he can play. But I think he showed, particularly in that playoff game, that Kirk can still be an effective player.
Hmm.
So I got one more thing I want to discuss with you,
Okay,
if you don't mind.
go
D
for it.
Winters.
Hmm.
what do I have a theory that, once I started looking at the numbers and, they paid Dre Greenlaw a total of $6 million, 3 million in a signing bonus, and then his cap hit is 3 million. Um Drake D Winters is on the books for 3.7 this year.
Mhm.
There isn't a third linebacker in the league that makes over $2 million. Close to $4 million for a third linebacker. Your third linebacker makes more than your backup quarterback does. It doesn't really make sense. And when I started thinking about the fact that they don't have any picks in the fifth, sixth, seventh round, and you've got Tatum Bethune and Nick Martin back there they make less than half combined than what Winters makes. He would be a trade candidate. I would take calls if somebody wanted to if they had interest in D Winters, I would take those calls because I just don't see a path forward for him on this roster moving forward. This is the last year of his contract. I don't see the 49ers don't have any sort of the only thing they've got matching rights on a contract next year. So if somebody they could offer him a contract and then they have the ability to match him. I have no reason to believe that if Dre Greenlaw has any sort of season at all, that he'll be back. He's only 28 years old. I just think that your fourth year linebacker at a certain at year four, that guy making $3.7 million can't be. He's supposed to be your present. He's not supposed to still be your future
Mhm.
at that point. So if he's not your present, which we've clearly established that he's they did not give Dre Greenlaw $6 million to be D Winner's backup. And if you
Right.
watch Dre Greenlaw play last year, Dre Greenlaw is still Dre Greenlaw. Now, he only played half the games, and that is a legitimate concern. But there's no question that if they're both healthy, Dre Greenlaw is the better football player. So now, do you just pay your third linebacker 4 million dollars and um be resigned to the fact that he's just going to walk at the end of the year? Because the way the calculation works, you might get a comp pick, but you might not. Or you might get a 6th round comp pick 2 years from now. I'd rather have a 4th round pick or a 5th round pick this year. I was explaining, and if you look at it, like the time value of money, you'd rather have $20 today than somebody to pay you back $20 2 years from now.
Right.
It's just the math says, give me that money now, and I can do whatever I can do with it. I'd rather have this draft pick this year than to have to think that my compensation is going to be a comp pick in 2028 that you might not even get because if depending it's on the calculations of free agents in and free agents out and what he gets in a contract. It's quite possible that you don't get any kind of compensation. The parallel is Aziz Shair, Al Shair. When he left, he ended up having to take a prove it deal for like $2 million or something like that, and they didn't get a comp pick at all for him. And it's not the craziest thing in the world that could happen with my man here. So again, what are your thoughts on? Do you just ride it out with him, or do you consider trading him?
So I saw I think it was Mayoko was saying that they may want to trade a linebacker in the draft, and the two linebackers that would be on the table would be Winters and Bethune. But for the reason that you stated, why Winters could could be a little bit more favorable for them to trade, and it makes sense to me if you look at it through that lens. And he's always going to, like if you're a team looking for a little bit more of a splash, Winters is a splashier player to trade, especially if
He's
he,
good.
yeah, especially if he is your second best linebacker, like then it's the value to pay for him is there. But I don't think a team in a similar situation as the 49ers would necessarily want to trade for him. So I didn't do the homework to even look at some of the teams that might be attractive spots for him to go. But this kind of comes back down to, the like, I don't imagine that the Niners' draft day is going to end with those 4 picks in the 4th round. Like, I imagine those things get sprinkled around, and maybe one goes for a next year pick or something, even though I think a lot of those teams are trying to stack those next year picks. But,
Mhm.
um, yeah, that would be an interesting one to think about,
If you think
to see
about
if he's
another
attractive for
team,
them.
like, for another team, it's like, okay, I could see where, I mean, I saw, he started this year, he had 100 tackles. I'm looking at the draft board, and I don't think that we're gonna at in the 5th round, I don't think we're gonna get a player as good as D Winters,
Mhm.
um, in the 5th round. So, I would be willing to give the Niners my 5th round pick to secure somebody who I don't think it's safe to say he is. I don't think there's any question at this point. He is a starting NFL linebacker. He is definitely one of the best 64 linebackers in the league. I don't think there's even a question of that. It's just, what, you are gonna have to pay him next year. And so that kind of factors into the calculus. Whereas if you pick up, you take a player in the 5th round, you're not gonna have to pay him for another 4 years. But it's a coin flip as to whether or not he's gonna be able to start for you
Mhm.
week 1, where I don't think there's any question. D Win there are a lot of teams in the league where D Winters could start, and you'd feel good about having him out there. And again, I'm not saying I would want to trade him. I don't know that I would have signed Dre, because I think that D Winters can be a good player. I'm not saying he's as good as Dre Greenlaw. I think that it is clear that when Dre Greenlaw is out on the field, he is a difference maker. It's still last year he was a difference maker. He just only played half the games. So and that's what it came down to when you read the papers in Denver, was that it wasn't that they were unhappy with his production. They loved his leadership, they loved his production. They just needed a little bit more reliability. They needed somebody who could be out there more than every other week, and that's fair.
Yeah. No, it's that is gonna be something, I think, because of Mayoko's reporting, and he's one of the big 49er guys. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at that for, to see what happens there. Yeah, and then I saw, like, Grant Cohn and others were talking about it, so it is a talking point
Mhm,
for this week for sure. So we're gonna try and be back next week and kinda recap what they do.
mhm.
More than likely another Sunday night, show that we'll
Sounds
we'll
good.
put out, Monday morning. And also, I just wanna mention, because we've been doing this, for Valkyrie stuff, but the Discord, there's a link to the Discord in the YouTube video, there's a link to the Discord in the podcast, feed post. And the Valkyries talk is going crazy in there right now. People are so excited for their Valkyries. I'd love to get more 49er stuff in there. I know there are lots of places to talk 49ers, like Rod said earlier, where he's got his spots. But if you are looking for a spot, if you listen to our stuff and you want to come hang out, definitely join the Discord. It's a lot of fun for me, but I like talking to Bay Area sports fans, obviously, but I like talking to folks who are there to kind of talk game and talk shop and not just be cheerleaders. And I think we've cultivated that on the Valkyrie side. So I'd love to do the same thing on the Niners side. And the name of this show goes all the way back to a Facebook group or actually a page that I'd created years ago, and that's how Rod and I met. So we'd love to kind of recreate something like that in the Discord. So if you are a Niners fan and you want to come chat, their link is there. We also have a Giants podcast. We talk Giants in there. We talk Warriors and Valkyries as well, and anything else. You can really chat about anything else you want in there. So just want to throw that out there. So Rod, I will chat with you during the week on draft day, I'm sure, and we'll figure out the time to meet up again so we can talk about the draft, and we'll do
Sounds
that
good.
next week. All right. So I guess I'll do one more little plug, which is the off-season dates for the Niners. I guess Monday technically is the first day of the off-season program, or OTAs are scheduled um, from late May through early June. The mandatory minicamp is June 9th. Rookie minicamp opportunities May 1st through the 4th or 8th through the 11th. They need to figure that out. And then late July is when training camp begins. So, this stuff comes sooner than later. Every time I'm like, oh, we have tons of time for the 49ers. And then you're like, oh, these dates kind of sneak up on you. So
Mhm.
just a heads up for other possible times for Rod and I to get back. We don't go week to week during the off season, but we do pick and choose when there is news. So, all right. That is it from here for Rod. I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.